Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the December 10th, 2024 Planning Commission regular meeting to order. The Planning Commission is holding hybrid meetings. Members of the public can attend the meeting in person or observe the meeting on Zoom online by visiting www.cityofarcata.org and following the live meetings link at the bottom of the city's homepage or on the city's YouTube channel. If you are attending remotely, please be aware that the Zoom feed provides the closest to real-time stream. If you rely on the other feeds and you wish to make comments, please be aware of the time lag on those feeds. The first item on our agenda is the land acknowledgement. The City of Arcata acknowledges that the lands we are located on are the unceded ancestral lands of the Wiyot tribe. The land that Arcata rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Gudene, meaning over in the woods or among the redwoods. Past actions by local, state, and federal governments remove the Wiyot and other indigenous peoples from the land and threaten to destroy their cultural practices. The City of Arcata acknowledges the Wiyot community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement seeks to aid in dismantling the legacy narratives of settler colonialism. Staff, will you please call roll?
Yeah, Commissioner Tagney?
Here.
Commissioner Lehman?
Here.
Commissioner Strickland?
Here.
Our newest commissioner, Commissioner Ham?
Here.
And Vice Chair Simmons.
Here.
And for the record, Chair Davies is out this week.
And I will note that we are joined by Community Development Director David Loya and Deputy Director, I am blanking on your first name, I'm sorry.
Jen Dart.
Janet Dart, thank you. Okay, next we have oral communications. During this time, people may make comments about items that are not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on one of our agenda items, you will have an opportunity when we are discussing those items. If you have comments about items that are not listed on our agenda today, please line up now behind the lectern. If you are on Zoom and you wish to make comments on matters that are not on today's agenda, please raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon on the right side of your screen, or by pressing *9 on your phone. The clerk will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. With that, I'd like to open public comment. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to comment during early oral communications. Feel free to state your name for the record. May we have the first speaker, please? Anyone online? Okay. With that, we will now move on to the consent calendar. We have one item on consent, which is to approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes, regular meeting minutes of November 12th, 2024. Would any commissioner like to pull this item? And I would actually like to pull this item.
Want to tell us why?
Oh, yeah, sorry. The meeting minutes say that you led the meeting, Dan, but I led the meeting.
It mentions me as vice chair in that report a couple of times.
Yeah, we had the computer system that we use to build the agendas hasn't been updated yet, so we'll go ahead and fix that. And so procedurally, the next step is to make a motion to approve the minutes with those corrections, and we'll just correct throughout anywhere where it mentions Vice Chair Tagney to replace that with Vice Chair Simmons.
I would like to make the motion to approve the consent calendar with the changes to the minutes for the November 12th meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move on to business items. Our one business item tonight is consideration of the Valley West Infill Opportunity Zone boundary adjustment. Can we begin with a staff report?
Yes. So the item before you tonight is consideration of changing the original Valley West infill area that was established with the housing element in 2019. I can pull up bear with me just a second here. Pull this up so it helps. There we go. Sorry, I should have had this up before. David, do you want to help me out here? Thank you. There we go. Okay, so you can see on the left is the original zoning. This is from the 2020 general plan, and the area that's surrounded in black is the original infill area that was identified in the housing element. And again, on the right, you can see the change in zoning that just recently happened. And again, the area in the black is the infill area that was originally identified. So we didn't change that when we did the changing of the land use in that area. And so now that we're getting into actually working on this infill area, we've got funding from the HUD Pro Housing Grant. We wanted to bring this back for reconsideration to determine, is this still the right boundary? Are there additional areas that we should encompass and include, especially given the zoning changes? There were also the two home key projects that were put in that are on the, I guess that's the west side of that boundary, which is another consideration because those are housing projects where before, when we were looking at this with the housing element, those were all hotels. So just wanted to bring this back to the commission to get some feedback and weigh in on this. Let me look at this next slide, if I can go to the next slide. The area that I've identified here in orange, all of the areas that are kind of surrounded in orange are the areas that we wanted to potentially consider. I think there's some reasons for considering these areas, and there's also some reasons for not. And I think, David, you might want to go in a little bit with the Zanzi properties to the north, because I think you've got more history with those. I think that it definitely makes sense really to include the rest of proper Valley West, but then when you look across the freeway, there's that one area that also seems to be a potential for including. There's definitely some potential for development in that area, although a lot of that area is the Mad River RV Park. So something else to consider there. Any questions that I can answer about kind of the background at all? Or I know some of you are newer and weren't here during the housing element, so.
Do you and David have a suggestion as to what we should do?
Yeah, so I think we've also got the GIS layer up that Jen can bring up, and we can look at these sites in more depth. One thing I just wanted to be clear, we went through a process to develop the infill opportunity zones, and so this is the very beginning of sort of the next process that we're going through. Some of you may recall that we modified the gateway area plan boundaries a couple times as we were going through and realizing like, oh, we really should take advantage of this parcel or that parcel. And so, this is very, very preliminary. We just wanted to, get your advice and recommendations and have, the group think about, should we expand these boundaries? And then we're going to go through a complete public process that'll involve, vetting that with the public, with the city council and so on and so forth. But, this might be a good way to, now that we've expanded the ability for these other parcels that are shown in the brownish color to accommodate housing, it seemed like a good opportunity to think about whether or not they should be in that expanded boundary for the infill opportunity zone.
I do have a question now, then, if this is a good time. The very north portion of this map, in what is the Zanzi, but above the road there, why are those in light purple? And some of that is housing, isn't that correct? Isn't there a multi-family dwelling being built in that purple zone?
There is, and it is, it's zoned light industrial, I believe, is the zoning for those parcels.
Yeah, and the reason why there's housing in the light industrial is because that was part of the Zanzi development agreement for those properties. There were certain properties that were identified for housing despite the underlying zoning.
Can you identify where the housing's going?
Yep, it's right here, and I think that, David, correct me, yeah, I think it's this parcel as well, these two parcels, kind of in the middle.
So why isn't that portion included in the brown?
When we went through the the redesignation process kind of towards the tail end of the general plan process and started including some of these properties that were originally other commercial designations, commercial general or commercial mixed or commercial central, and we collapsed them all into, either commercial central or commercial mixed. We really were targeting, for this particular site anyway, just the properties that were already in commercial. Some of that was done in consultation with the Zanzis. They have existing developments on the 2 parcels for the housing development that are already built out, and so those are for all intents and purposes brand new, all said and done. And then they also have a landowner on the westerly 2 parcels that new landowner that has plans to develop them not for housing, and so so we didn't change the zoning on those because they were already being developed for the purpose that they were zoned for currently.
Okay, I get it. And
We did, however, pull in this, Far East one there. The Zanzis are considering, they still own that particular parcel and they're considering developing housing on it. And so they asked to change that one to commercial mixed.
And what's the blue one?
That's a city parcel. It's public facilities. It's part of the Carlson Park complex. As a matter of fact, I strongly encourage everyone to go out and check that parcel out because we just installed a killer meaning good, killer in the 80s version of like radical playground there. And then the pickleball courts are out there and there's a new trail. So you should definitely go visit that area if you haven't been.
I'm generally curious about, there's a lot of industrial light like across the 299 over there that's, I think, formerly used for cannabis, but pretty open and available. I am curious, has there been any discussion around allowing some sort of like mixed housing in that kind of zoning? Maybe like live work or just, some kind of alternate to allow some kind of more use in those, what I'm considering maybe underutilized open or more open sites.
Yeah, we, can you zoom way out and show the whole city? When we were looking at redesignations, a lot of our commercial and a lot of our industrial properties converted to commercial mixed use. So like the whole Gateway area was most of it was industrial anyway. And so that area in the north, and then just a small sliver in the coastal zone to the south is industrial. And we're actually looking at, changing uses in the south. And so at the time when we went through this process, the idea really was to try and preserve that industrial land base for those uses. Arcata does kind of uniquely among, cities in our region have a pretty strong industrial base. And so we wanted to make sure there was a space for that to occur in the town and not completely, shift those uses over to higher density residential uses that would be incompatible with the industrial uses. But there are some forms of housing that are still allowed in industrial zoning. So as you mentioned, live work is one, caretaker's unit, pretty low density, but still you could, I guess if you got creative with the live work, you could, get a fair amount of density on one of these parcels. But really the idea was to try and segregate those land uses and make sure that you could still have, a kiln to, dry clay products and we could still be a manufacturing sector.
And I think part of the idea too is that there would need to be a place for Gateway light industrial businesses to relocate, and so we need to preserve.
True. Yeah,
even if
that's
it's currently
huge
low
part of the
on-
conversation, yeah.
Anyone else have questions or thoughts?
Well, it seems like we should just be discussing these then kind of section by section, right? So we discussed the Zanzi portion a little bit. right across where the home key projects have occurred, we still do have some hotels in that stretch, right? And are there any other uses in that?
There's, let's see if I can point it out. Yeah, I can turn off the zoning. Let's see. There's a medical office, or maybe it was a former medical office. I'm not sure if it's an existing medical office. And then there's a vacant site and another like office building. So there are some of those. I'll turn off this.
And so the discussion is whether or not commercial mixed is an improvement on what they have now for zoning?
Yes.
All right, and can you tell us some advantages, one way or the other?
Well, this would give, I mean, as far as including them in the infill area, it would just give them more opportunities for development, especially if they were wanting to develop housing. Just more that they could do with their property than they could with just the commercial mixed zoning. Make it a little easier, is the idea.
Yeah, I think one criteria I think about when I'm looking at these properties is, you know, is there the potential for redevelopment, or the other question is, do you have a lot of vacant land that could be stimulated by being included in an infill opportunity zone? The difference between being in and being out is that, you know, we will have these objective design standard based codes, you know, form-based codes similar to the one we just adopted for the gateway, but, you know, designed with this neighborhood in mind, with that ministerial pathway towards higher density development. And so, you know, if an area is, you know, really built out and it, you know, isn't going to help that area to include it, and may actually harm that area, because you'll then, you know, start creating those conflicts between existing development and proposed new development. You know, is that really the right approach, or, you know, or is there enough opportunity there for us to take advantage of it?
So with that said, if we jump across 101, it seems as though there's no land over there that's not highly utilized, and very specifically, I guess with the exception of maybe at where Sequoia Gas is, it seems a little underutilized down in there, and what Franklin's Automotive. But the big RV park would be very incompatible with any kind of housing scenario, right? And then we have, what is that, BLM's back in there, and Fish and Wildlife, something like that.
Yep.
And then the California Welcome Center. That's not going to change, for sure. So the only sliver that's maybe interpretable is right out there next to 101.
Why is that RV park incompatible with, I mean, it could change, right?
I guess it could change. It's hard
I mean,
to
it's-
imagine. I don't know. I don't see that RV parks are, I mean, it looks highly utilized and robust, but I don't know. Maybe that portion then, I don't know. What do others think? Or
I
what
see a
does
lot of
staff think?
parking.
I see a lot of land.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I not so much the RV park, which I get needs all that, but even the existing buildings have a lot of parking and, you know, sort of empty space right now.
I think I'm curious to understand, like, what, if it is, like, designated for infill, what would be the disadvantage, like, of including in the boundary? Because if the priority is to build more housing and you include more area to do that and more incentive to do that, like, you know, if it's not being identified right now as that pathway, like, I don't see disadvantage of just including it for potential development in the future.
I think that's a great point. The staff point on that, though, was incompatible uses. and I don't know this, I don't quite understand the world of RV parks, but if there's an opening there for some of it to be housing or all of it, then I guess you're right. Why not rezone it, huh?
Well, I think the RV park represents a higher density than a single-family housing neighborhood, but it could be densified even further with like multi-story, multi-unit.
It could be densified a lot further. And why is this different than other properties in the Gateway area that that are now part of an infill opportunity zone? I mean, is it going to change? I don't know, but maybe. It's a lot of land.
Yeah, I think the RV park is highly utilized now, and there may not be a financial motivation currently, but it is a lot of fairly easily convertible land. It's not quite vacant, but it's pretty close. The other, side to that, there may be an economic and tourism reason or rationale to maintain it as an RV park and exclude it from that streamlined permitting. We did redesignate it commercial mix though, so we were kind of envisioning, I think, through the general plan process, it moving in that direction.
Yeah, I think that's important, right? Because when we had this conversation last time, we redesignated it with the idea that hopefully we would be building more housing there. Like it switched from, what was it, like commercial serving? Yeah,
Commercial visitor serving, yeah.
yeah. And so then the only real question we have now is whether or not we want this sort of streamlined process for future buildings. And I don't see any reason not to include. And that doesn't mean that it'll happen, right? You would still need interest from the property owner and all that sort of stuff.
But it probably won't happen if we don't include it.
Yeah, and just a quick reminder that, the Housing Accountability Act and several other bills have really strengthened the alternatives for private landowners and developers to be able to build housing if it's allowed on a site. And so with the commercial mixed, housing is allowed as a standalone use. That's kind of the direction we've been going. We haven't updated the zoning ordinance to reflect that, but that's what it says in the general plan. And so they still would have streamlined processes, even if they weren't included in an infill opportunity zone. I think what we're signaling with the infill opportunity zone and perhaps with the changes that have happened at the state level, the highest and best purpose of an infill opportunity zone or one of these form-based codes is for us to be able to go out and attract investment in the community. And we've signaled this is the kind of investment, this is the kind of development we want to see.
Abby, I want to make sure you have a chance to weigh in on this.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the area that we're talking about with the RV park, is there could we consider that is there a transit hub over there? Because when I think about people leaving there maybe on foot or on bike, it is kind of dangerous getting over, going through those roundabouts and then ending up in Valley West where you have the commercial hub. So I maybe Street View would help me out, but are there sidewalks? Is that has that transportation area actually been built out yet? Maybe it will in the future and more housing would encourage that, but.
Abby, I ride a bike there a lot, and it's pretty safe compared to other areas in the city. It may not look that way, but I feel pretty secure riding there as compared to riding on Alliance Road, for example.
I think that's a really good point, though, that, this area is one of the higher density areas in Arcata in general. And, if we were to densify to kind of make sure that densification includes some sort of transit-oriented development, transit hub or something that, could really focus, you know, kind of a mix of modes in the north part of Arcata. And so I wrote a note down, and I'll talk with our engineering team about that. I think that's something that we could definitely look to include in the form-based code as it comes forward. And then just as sort of a side note, we do, part of the Reconnecting Arcata funding that we're working with Caltrans on, that the city was awarded, is to address connectivity with the Valley West area and the rest of Arcata. Because it is, I think if you're, an avid cycler, it feels comfortable, but I think for the average, person who's, maybe relying on a bicycle because they don't have a car, it can be intimidating to ride through a traffic circle. And I don't believe there are jump out, I'm getting, head shakes. No, there are not. There's no way to jump off the traffic circle. You're riding through it if you're going down that way. So, those kinds of improvements, I think we can, program into, either this Reconnecting Arcata, or we can, as we did with the Gateway Area Plan, there's a lot of transportation improvements identified in that plan to, to address the higher density. In fact, I remember pointing out to our consultant, like real early on, like, what the heck, like 3/4 of this document, I'm exaggerating, is transportation. This is supposed to be a, housing document, an economic development document. And they calmed me down and made me see the truth is that, there's a huge connection between, transportation and density. And so that's, I envision a similar kind of thing. It won't just be like, what are the buildings going to look like in this area? We'll actually have, improved and enhanced transit options and other alternatives.
The other thing I was going to mention about that is that staff is going to be working with our engineering department throughout this process, because it does have a lot of overlap with the Reconnecting Arcata. So we're already talking about collaboration and how we can really work with them on both their project and this infill project, so that they would dovetail together and have a lot of engagement opportunities where we would all be kind of communicating that same message.
Does the infill zone need to be contiguous or not?
I don't believe so. I think that we're all one city, and the whole idea at this point is that we're going to do as much as we can to make sure that we're connected regardless of the 101 driving right through the middle of our city. I think that a lot of people, what we've heard from a lot of community members who live over here is they do feel that they live in Valley West. And so just isolating this section here in the middle as Valley West, a lot of kind of those ancillary neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that are just maybe not directly in Valley West do feel like that's, that's maybe where they go shopping, that's where they go for dinners and things like that. And so they just feel like that's their community too.
They need a pedestrian bridge.
Yeah.
Something that Reconnecting Arcata can work on.
The second point would be, I think maybe just temperature check, all of us would be supportive of the section of parcels just east of the 101 there, and then west of the existing infill opportunity zone. I feel like we've discussed it previously, and so I think it might be safe to say we'd all be supportive of that section.
Okay, before we get too far down this road, I do want to open it up for public comment in case anyone is waiting online. No? All right. Do I still open it for public comment even if there's no one in attendance? Okay. Just making sure I'm running the meeting well. Okay. Well, so are there any areas left that we haven't
Just
gotten
this, did we want to talk about this at all, or are we, I don't think that staff had a really strong recommendation about this. I think that there were some reasons not to include it, but just again, to weigh in on that from your guys' perspective. From Commission.
What are the reasons not to include it?
I guess, in part just because it's pretty built out already with a lot of brand new buildings. The Matter Business Park was approved, like 10 years ago, I think now. And all the parcels either have a planned development on them or are built out now. And so, there's not a whole lot of redevelopment there that I see, but we could also, just include it. I mean, these documents sometimes live on for much longer than you anticipate them living on for. And in, 30 years, maybe there's, reason to redevelop them at that time.
So the way it's zoned right now, housing would not be allowed on these front parcels, is that correct?
Housing would be, they're mixed use.
So the commercial mixed, all it would do is include it in the ministerial process and perhaps a little easier permit process.
Yeah, it would define the development parameters, and I have a feeling, just because of the way that the state is going, that, if I had to, forecast a little bit, is that we might start, breaking down the boundaries at some point in the future and saying, well, okay, we had this boundary line determined, but now we've got objective standards for this area. Why don't we just apply these to, this entire region? And that may be what comes out of this discussion, regardless of, which parcels have the highest potential for redevelopment, which is kind of what has been guiding or areas we want to see redeveloped. So, there's a, mini storage. Would we rather see that be a mini storage? There's the air gas, do we want to see that redeveloped? If we can incentivize that, that's why we, made these smaller boundaries and gave them special names and special attention. But the more opportunistic approach might be, someone comes in and they're not an infill area, and we still want them to be encouraged to develop. Maybe we give them the objective standards. But at this point, we're kind of continuing with the prior approvals, and so in that, we need to have a boundary. I think the boundary that we have existing is a real solid one. There's the highest potential within that area, but now that we've rezoned, I think that was the main reason why staff started wondering about, expanding it. I think to Commissioner Strickland's point, the area west of the existing boundary, both on the east side and west side of the highway, probably makes a lot of sense to include. Yeah, I'm lukewarm on the Zanzi properties, but you could certainly recommend including those, and we'll start out with that as a framing.
Is there any disadvantage to adding more area? Like, I guess it creates more work during the process of creating the form-based code and thinking about, mobility and all that kind of stuff, just because there's more areas that you're considering. But I guess I'm looking for a downside that I'm not finding.
I agree with Matt. I don't see the downside.
I don't really see a downside on it either. And it is attached, it's not like it's completely in a different location or something like that. All of the work that we're going to do would be in this area, and the zoning matches. It just seems like it would make sense.
David mentioned Carlson Park, and I think encouraging more housing production right next to a really nice new park that we built is a good goal for the city to have.
Can you tell me, are all the Zanzi parcels, except for the one you previously mentioned, which I think is in the upper right corner, are the others sold or in some kind of contract or plan?
I would say yes, sold, in contract, or in plans. So there's a mix, I think, on all of the properties at this point.
That's great to hear.
Okay. Do we want to make a recommendation to staff on this to include basically all of the commercial mixed zoned area within Valley West in this infill opportunity zone?
Do we want to extend it to include, those properties? I think so, is the answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Any
Okay.
Objections to that? Okay. I don't think you need a formal vote from us, right? This is just...
No, just needed a recommendation, wanted to kind of get staff had just been discussing it internally and wanted to get kind of a check on where we were leaning. Just get your guys' thoughts on it at this point. Thank you.
I have a quick question. So this is going to go to the city council and they'll get to review our recommendation and then have the ultimate say essentially.
Yes, it's going to go through a whole public process too. So we're going to be, the HUD Pro Housing Grant has funding for this infill area. So we'll be doing a lot of engagement, a lot of discussion, and it will go to city council for their recommendation as well.
And then after that, it would be formally adopted,
Yes.
if it makes it through all those hoops?
Yep.
And is this over the next year or so, or what are we?
Probably
talking?
the next year and a half. We're working on the scope right now for hiring a consultant, and we're going through the setup phase of the grant. So that takes a little bit of time, but yeah, I would say over the next year, and it'll be coming back. You'll be seeing it again.
Is there a new form-based code that's going to be developed for this area that's different than the Gateway Code?
Yeah, we've discussed form-based code and objective design standard. So yes, there will be a new code for this area.
But you don't have to start from scratch, right?
No, we do not.
All right. Well, you have our recommendation. I guess that means we move on to correspondence and communications. Do any planning commission members have correspondence or communications? Does staff?
I do have one thing I just wanted to share, that the Valley West Community Center survey is out, and if you can share that widely with your, any members that you know, any community members that you know, we're trying to get feedback on a community center for this area, so we're working on that plan right now. So that's out on the website.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Do we have any applications for the open seat? Is it formally announced and available now, or?
For the planning commission?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have one application for planning commission, and the city council's first review is anticipated on January 15th, excuse me. The other bit of information I wanted to share is that at 3 p.m. this Thursday, 12/12, the city council will hold a special meeting to swear in the new members, the existing members who were elected again. And so that'll happen here at City Hall.
Great. All right. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.